Hey everybody, this is Jimmy from This Movie Sucks, the channel where we watch bad movies so you don't have to. On this episode of Behind the B-Movie, we take a look at the 1988 horror fantasy film Waxwork. So, make sure not to cross the velvet rope, because we are going to exhibit all the macabre secrets hidden away at the Waxwork Museum. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Waxwork is a 1988 American fantasy horror comedy film written and directed by Anthony Hickox in his directorial film debut. Hickox would go on to direct over a dozen films, including Hellraiser 3: Hell on Earth. The script for the film was written by Hickox in only 3 days, its inspiration being a loose remake of the 1921 silent film Waxworks. Initially, there were concerns that the film would be too similar to The Monster Squad, which came out a year prior. They were turned down by every studio they approached, including Vestron, but once the company's head read the script, he reversed the decision and made this film a Vestron production. This was Hickox's first feature film, but he was never nervous during production. Well, not until the completion bond people arrived saying that they were out of money and needed to wrap it up. The result was a heavily tourniqueted end battle, but luckily Hickox's father had advised him to shoot the ending first because small budget films usually run out of money.
It started back when I was a kid. In London we have a thing called Madame Tussauds, which is a big waxwork, unlike this one which only has 18 displays. And it was always a little dream, what would it be like to spend a night in the waxworks? And that's kind of where the idea came from. And then Stefan and I met, and you were there?
I know, at Hugo's, go on.
No, we met at the Pastoria. We were sitting drunk one night at the Pastoria, which was a kind of regular thing when you were unemployed in Hollywood. And I said, let me write a horror film. He'd never seen a horror film before in his life. And I said, well, let me write one and we'll put Deborah in it. And here we are. And that's how it happened.
Camera's coming through.
All right.
Tony sort of sold me the idea through his charm and something so persuasive in his desire to do this project struck me, and we made a deal that he would write the script and I would pay him on delivery. So I thought that would give me a nice time. But the guy wrote the script in front of me in 3 days, and that was delivery. That's the script, and that's the film we made. And then it took us, I don't know, about 20 companies and 6 months until the deal was done and the film was set up. And it's been a wonderful experience, preparing several other pictures together, and we have a fantastic movie.
I think we're enjoying this. We've got 6 weeks to film something that anybody else would take like a year to film.
I think people are proud, too, to be working on this. It's just really good stuff. I mean, it truly is a fun experience. I look forward to coming to the set in the morning. I do want to leave at night.
The wallet.
Well,
You want the car?
you get the house?
The house, yeah, you can have the house.
He gave me a pool, too.
It's a
Boy, I'm getting a lot on this film. That's why. No, I mean, the people have been so kind. Everyone is so lighthearted. There's no tension. There's no stress. You come here, you do your work, and you go home. It's been wonderful. And we have an okay director, too.
The film stars Zach Galligan as Mark, our naive yet optimistic protagonist. Galligan is most recognizable as Billy from the Gremlins franchise. The character Mark is a teenager that comes from a wealthy family, and in one of the initial scenes is scolded by his mother for having drinks with the family's butler. In fact, the last name Loftmore was picked specifically because it sounded rich. The mansion in the opening scene was also the same mansion used in the movie Willard in 1971 and Witchboard in 1986. It has since been retired as a filming location. The mother, Mrs. Loftmore, is played by Jennifer Basie. who is most recognizable from her role in All My Children from 1983 to 2011. The film also has Deborah Foreman from Valley Girl and April Fool's Day, Michelle Johnson from Blame It on Rio and Death Becomes Her, and Dana Ashbrook from Twin Peaks. Mark meets up with his friends as they notice a new wax museum has opened up in their upscale residential neighborhood. Referencing what a strange place it is to try and do business, they meet the owner, played by character actor David Warner, who has appeared in dozens of films, including The Omen, Tron, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, and my personal favorite, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Ooze. He has also had a long career voice acting, voicing iconic villains the Red Skull in Spider-Man the Animated Series, and Ra's al Ghul in Batman the Animated Series. Talk about a gem of an actor to add to your B-horror movie project. On the Blu-ray release of Waxwork, in the audio commentary, Hickox revealed that due to the actor's limited availability in his schedule, he had to film all of his scenes for the movie in just 2 days. The owner invites the teens to come for a midnight showing of the Waxworks, which is filled with various death scenes involving werewolves, vampires, zombies, mummies, and so on. The teens wander off and step over the velvet rope, and they are transported to a live-action scene where their lives are in real danger from the monsters on display. The 18 most evil beings used in the film are Marquis de Sade, the werewolf, Count Dracula, the Golem, the Phantom of the Opera, the Mummy, some George A. Romero-style zombies, Frankenstein's monsters, the Invisible Man, a voodoo priest, a witch, a snake man, Rosemary's Baby, an axe murderer, a multi-eyed alien, a giant talking Venus flytrap, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There are 3 characters that were supposed to be on displays in the Waxwork, but were left out due to legal reasons. This would be Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th film franchise, the 5 children from 1960's Village of the Damned, and The Thing from 1982's The Thing. In the shooting script, Jonathan is staring at the exhibit of Jason Voorhees when Jonathan tells the owner that it looked like the same Jason mask from the movies. The owner asks Jonathan, "They made a movie about the Jason killings?" This was not the only connection the film would have with the Friday the 13th franchise, as Kane Hodder, famous for portraying Jason Voorhees, did stunt work for the film, and also had an uncredited role in the film as Frankenstein's monster. The special effects for the film were done by makeup and special effects guru Bob Keane. Keane spent 18 hours a day for 8 weeks working on the monsters in the film. Keane began his career as a model maker, working on superb films such as Star Wars and Superman, but also worked on The Dark Crystal, Alien, The Neverending Story, Highlander, Hellraiser, and Candyman. The most memorable segment in the film for me is the first one with the werewolf, mostly because this segment has a cameo by none other than John Rhys-Davies from The Lord of the Rings and the Indiana Jones franchises. For the werewolf, Hickox asked Bob Keane for a howling-like werewolf. This whole segment was filmed in the Los Angeles Griffith Park. The guy who gets ripped in half by the werewolf is played by Hickox's brother. His brother would come in handy later on as well, in order for director Anthony Hickox to get certain cuts of the film past executive producer Dan Ireland. He persuaded his brother to parade around the set in tight denim shorts. This tactic worked, as the final cut of the film was intact upon completion of the picture. Talk about taking one for the team.
My hero?
A lot of the time, the film's problems are usually just one scene and one problem. This film is the whole film. We've got creatures in every single scene almost, and we have lots of them. The fact we had 18 creatures and they all had to represent creatures we know, like Frankenstein, the werewolf, the mummy, witches, without copying the sort of universal standard creatures. So that was the hardest problem, was coming up with new designs for all those standard creatures, which was a lot of fun to do. A lot of the stuff, a lot of the witch and people like that, are operated on the cable controls, which can take up to 6 people to operate them. You get some sort of playoffs on that because 6 people all playing together, all playing one part. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. This is another one of our beasties. The radio control. Here's the secret of it. Once worn by someone, you can have complete isolation there, so you don't have all those cables hanging out from behind. But you get some problems with that. You don't get as good a movement. It's only good for the small movements. We didn't have the luxury of knowing who was going inside each creature. So for us, it was much more make them as wide as possible range. And then as we built the creatures in England, when we came to America, we then audition the parts and find people who can fit into each of the things and people we can work with. It's very important that you can work with the people inside these costumes, because if someone is not happy in there, you're not going to get performance out of them. It's not something you can coach out of someone. You have to have people who are enthusiastic and want to be creatures.
In the vampire segment, during the scene in the basement of the vampire's mansion, the crew on the set said that it was the bloodiest thing ever put to screen. Much of the gore in the scene was cut by the MPAA. In the footage left of the vampire segment, the human flesh being eaten at the vampire dinner is actually made of rhubarb, watermelon, and strawberries. Christopher Bradley said in an interview that the bridge attached to hold his fake fangs in place to the roof of his mouth broke during production. So Bradley had to stuff chewing gum inside the hollow fangs in order to get them to stick to his teeth. The vampire sequence originally came before the werewolf one, but they swapped them out as the later serves as a better introduction to the workings of the film's concept. Patrick Tantallo said that the zombie sequence was filmed in one night in Griffith Park. Because they only had one night to film the sequence, the scene where a severed zombie hand grabs Mark on the wrist was filmed in reverse. Catherine Schaefer, who was the lady zombie in the graveyard sequence, was actually the secretary of executive producer and fellow zombie Dan Ireland. Galligan hated that Hickox made him tuck in his shirt for the scene where his character leads the police to the wax museum. After the policemen visit the Waxwork with Mark, he realizes that many of the statues of the victims resemble missing people from the posters he had seen. These posters were actually just copies of the missing person posters from the opening credits of The Lost Boys in 1987. One of the last exhibits featured, and by far the most interesting, actually features a historical figure, Marquis de Sade, a French nobleman and revolutionary politician, a philosopher and writer. Sade is best known for his erotic works, which combined philosophical discourse with pornography, depicting sexual fantasies with an emphasis on violence, particularly against women and children. He became infamous for numerous rapes, the sexual abuse of children, and the murdering of prostitutes. He claimed to be a proponent of absolute freedom, unrestrained by morality, religion, or law. The words sadism and sadist are derived from his name. In the original shooting script, when Sarah is being whipped by Sade, the slashes she receives remain on her back when she returns to the waxwork. After Mark and Sarah return to the waxwork, the script describes the scene as, Sarah is back in her normal clothes, but we can tell by the rest of her that she has really been through the experience that we saw. However, in the film, the slashes that Sarah receives from her whipping disappear when she returns to the waxwork with Mark. The film was given a limited release in the United States by Vestron Pictures in June 1988. It grossed $808,114 at the box office. It was released by Vestron Video that same year on VHS, both in R-rated and unrated editions. The film budget was $3.5 million. The film was released on DVD in 2003 by Artisan Entertainment as a double feature with the sequel Waxwork 2: Lost in Time and again in 2012 as part of an 8 horror movie collection DVD. Lionsgate released the film on Blu-ray for the first time along with its sequel Waxwork 2 on October 18, 2016 as part of their Vestron Video Collector Series line. Rotten Tomatoes reports an approval rating of around 56%, and TV Guide gave it 1 out of 5 stars. John Stanley in the Creature Feature Guide had a higher opinion of the film, giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. He cited the intriguing premise as one reason for a positive review. A comic book adaptation of the film was published by Blackthorn Publishing in November 1988. One is a black and white one-shot, and one is Waxwork 3D Special Number 1, number 55 of Blackthorn's 3D series. In 1992, the sequel, Waxwork 2 Lost in Time, was released, which is a fun follow-up with a lot of humor and a cameo by Bruce Campbell, but that will be covered in a future episode for sure. The house used as the Waxworks exterior is still there, but the owner has grown the hedge around it just to make it less visible to discourage Waxworks fans from taking photo ops. Overall, Waxwork is an interesting film of its era. It has a phenomenal cast and balances its fantasy elements only to complement its horror. The different monster segments are memorable, and the practical effects by Keen are top-notch. Even watching it over 30 years past the release date, and the effects are still impressive. The entire production design of the film establishes an aesthetic that is unapologetically 80s, yet in a way seems timeless in its storytelling. This is truly one of the best gems 80s B-movies has to offer.